Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We're here to recap Week 7 of SEC Baseball overall, Week 3 of conference play. Before we get to any of that, though, I have to remind you that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover this season is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Get ready for a new season of fishing fun with Academy Sports and Outdoors and reel in the best gear at low prices every day. Plus, Academy offers easy ways to shop and save time, like free 1-hour in-store or curbside pickup on academy.com orders. All right, Mark, kind of a weird week around the SEC because of Mother Nature, where we had, the series we'll talk about first here finished before, right around the time that the first game of the series I was at finished. They were done, and that was Florida and Ole Miss, but a lot of doubleheaders. A pretty light schedule today because of the Thursday series and the doubleheaders and what have you. So kind of a weird one, but no shortage of interesting results here. So I guess to start us off, let's start with that Florida Ole Miss series. We just were talking about it, before we hit record here. What were you watched a decent bit of this, you said. So what kept you watching in this case with this series?
Yeah, it was riveting. I mean, it really wasn't that well played, but there was a lot going on, and I felt like either team comes out of this thinking, oh, we could have swept this, right? Even Florida, who ended up going 1-2 this weekend, and Florida's still really fighting it from an injury standpoint and from a pitching standpoint. They had a ton of walks in the first game, and then come into the second game, they're in the crucial part, they walk the bases loaded, and that's how Ole Miss gets the winning run. I mean, it's just those kinds of things. If you're Florida and you're trying to dig out of this hole where you played Tennessee and Georgia in the first 2 weeks, and then you go and you walk, the population of a small town, I think that's the part that's really frustrating, right? If you're a Florida guy, if you're Ole Miss, you're thinking, oh, wow, they want to help us. We'll certainly take it. And Ole Miss did a lot, that they earned as well, and to protect that home turf. We talked about heading into the year, the tough home schedule that Ole Miss had, and they would have to win some of those games against teams that were predicted to finish ahead of them. And certainly this is the first step, right? Right now, you look at Ole Miss and they're ranked, and they're, we feel better about the Rebels than we do about the Gators. That wasn't the case, a month ago. So that was a big win, a big series win for Ole Miss, who didn't pitch as well as they like. I think I have some concerns there, but they're really hitting the ball and hitting the ball out of the park. And I feel like that's that's something that's kind of been hit or miss for them during their little swoon, and for them to be able to come out on top, you got to feel good if you're the Rebels. I mean, they're in position right now. If they continue to move at this pace, they're going to be in that hosting mix, right? And after the years that they've had to even be in that conversation, that's got to be just a shot of momentum, right, for that program.
Yeah, they've already, with their 6 conference wins, already have as many as they had all of the 2023 conference season. Yeah. So that gives you an idea of how far along they've come. And yeah, I mean, I've kind of sat here and had the same thought you've had about the pitching, where it's like, it feels like Ole Miss is kind of getting away with it a little bit, but they don't ask you how, they just ask how many at the end of the season. Yep. And so the fact that they're getting away with it, I think, is good news for Ole Miss, because it means they're not necessarily the best version of themselves, and they're still winning games, and that's a valuable skill. So I'm
there'll be days, when the pitching carries them, but it's a team sport, right? So sometimes your hitters are going to carry the day, and other times your pitchers are. And Ole Miss is they're hitting enough on days that they don't pitch, and they're pitching enough on days that they don't hit. And because of that, it's tough to keep that going. But right now they are, and they're in a position of strength because of it.
On Florida, real quick before we move on, to me, their biggest, not their biggest hope, because that implies that they're just the players don't have any agency in it. But I think among the bigger reasons for optimism for them is that you've already played Tennessee and Georgia.
Yeah,
and those are two of the three best teams in the conference right now.
Right.
Arkansas, LSU, two of the four best, if you want to put it that way. So you kind of have to hope that's the case. I mean, yes, you would have liked to have gotten this series, but it's a road series, and okay, so you go from here. Obviously, it's a huge hole. There's just no way around it. But that's kind of got to be part of the hope there.
Something you said just kind of reminded me. I started doing something on the dish this weekend. One where I'm projecting the records for the rest of the season. So you kind of see, okay, well, what does Mark think? How these teams are going to finish? But probably more importantly, we started adding the strength of schedule, the intra-conference strength of schedule. Guess where Florida is? They're number one. Their opponents have a 778 winning percentage. And keep in mind, that doesn't include games that Florida played against those teams. So that's not how this works. You don't get credit you don't get to boost it up by losing to your opponents. It's how they did against other teams. And Florida's number one. And I think you can sort of understand, hey, you go to Knoxville, and this doesn't include home and away. It's just who you play. But you go to Knoxville, you get Georgia, who was playing absolutely out of their minds that weekend. And then you go to we'll call it top 15 Ole Miss team. That's a really tough opening 3 weekends. And it's got to get a little bit easier. I know the SEC is tough, but it will get easier as the schedule, I guess, balances a little bit. I know it's unbalanced, but it will balance a little bit where Florida might not be the number 1 out of 16 in the SEC, which makes you the toughest conference schedule in the country, right? So, I mean, I know people are down with the 1-8 start, but there's a really good chance that they get back into it and can at least get to the point where they're on the NCAA bubble and have a chance to get in the postseason. And if you do that, you played well enough that you're probably on a little bit of a heater. And you would be the kind of team like they were a year ago that, hey, I don't want to see those jokers in my regional. And if they get healthy, I certainly don't want to see, if King is his best self, Peterson is his best self, and you get Coppola back, and then you got Clemente who you can use and, maybe is that stopper kind of guy to come in whenever. That's a really scary pitching staff, and pitching is their problem right now because they're scoring enough runs.
Yeah, I've said on radio the last couple of weeks that Florida feels like the team most likely to be what LSU was last year, where they make enough of a run to get in, and then once they're in, I mean, heck, Florida might be Florida from last year, right? I mean, because Florida was the same way, but I guess I compare it to LSU because the hole that LSU fell in was so deep. Like, we left them for dead at 3-12, and why wouldn't we, right? But
unlike last year, Florida doesn't have the overall record problem because they're not dropping midweek games,
right?
At least not yet. So it's all conference record at this point. So and with these expanded conferences, we don't really know how that's going to be judged. Certainly, the basketball committee didn't really care a whole lot. We'll see what the baseball committee thinks.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Certainly. Yeah. Rumor has it the first Nerdcast is coming up here pretty soon, Mark. Yeah. So you guys will have to have that debate for too much longer. Yeah, we're coming up on Mark's time of year. When the pollen is out, it's Mark's time of year. I bring that up because I'm dealing as we speak with a little bit of a headache. I assume based on the pollen that is covered my car and the roads and pretty much everything here in North Carolina. All right, let's move on to Auburn and Georgia. I thought, funny enough, somebody, your friend and mine, Lindsey Crosby, brought this up on Weekend Waypoints this morning, that they gave up 24 runs to Georgia, and that felt like a win. And I guess in fairness, only four of those were on Friday or in game one, Friday.
Right.
So there were 20 total in the doubleheader, so that skews it a little bit, But I think he's right. That's 8 runs a game on average. You had to feel pretty good about that. And for Auburn to have done that and not get a win is a tough pill to swallow. Now, in some regard, they did it to themselves. In that finale, they worked really hard to tie it. Ike Irish with an RBI ground out to tie it. Bub Terrell with a home run in the 10th to give them a lead. And then they give up 5 runs without getting an out in the bottom of the 10th inning. And, there was a bad error on Jet Johnston, throwing home just.
Yeah. It sped up on him.
Right, 100%. And so, because he's a position player too, so it's not like this typical pitcher, like, oh, he just doesn't know how to field his position. Like Jet Johnson's also a position player. So that was just the game sped up on him kind of deal, I have to assume. But regardless, for Auburn to have pitched that well relative to expectations against Georgia and to come away without a win is tough, because even if you just get that finale, it's like, all right, we salvaged something. This is a road series. We'll be fine. And I think Auburn still will be fine. But man, that was felt like a missed opportunity to at least get something out of that weekend.
Absolutely. I mean, it was one of those, I guess, series where Auburn hung with a Georgia team that we assumed, especially playing at Foley, was just going to hit missile after missile. And that, I mean, Georgia had their moments. I don't want to take away from that, but it wasn't like what we had seen in prior weeks. Auburn was able to kind of keep them under wraps to a point. We're grading on a scale, and I felt like that they would get one of those games, and certainly that it looked like they were going to after the great comeback that they had in the finale. But it wasn't meant to be. Georgia's just kind of that team right now. They're just finding ways to win, and they did it without Trey Phelps, who didn't play, and it just goes to show how strong a lineup it is, and how much their pitching is improving. Because I honestly believe if Auburn and Georgia play 3 weeks ago the way Georgia was pitching then, Auburn probably wins the series, not just a game. But Georgia's gotten so much better. Curley moving into the rotation, so his role has been extended. Finley's been pretty good. He wasn't as good this week as last week, but he's given you some length. And I feel like, with Colton Smith, I mean, he came in and was just absolutely unhittable. I think he had, 5 perfect innings with a whole bunch of Ks. And if this is who, if he's back to being that, this is a really scary Georgia team that I'm super fired up, about their ceiling. And with Auburn, you got swept on the road in a very difficult position. And I feel like that's kind of where we are right now with them. They're going to have some good games. They're going to have some bad games because it's a young team, and that's part of it. I'll see Auburn next week. They're hosting Alabama. That should, it's always fun when those two teams play, and they're both good this year. So I feel like that's, that'll be a good place for Ole to show up to take in some games next week.
Yeah, similarly, I've got first of all, before I forget to bring it up, Georgia's 28-2, which is just, it's gotten to the point where like that's a record. And there are other, like Tennessee obviously has a gaudy record too, but so they're not the only one. But just something struck me about that this morning when I was looking at a box score. They're 28-2, which is, this just looks gaudy, because it is. I will see Georgia here in a few weeks as they host Arkansas. That should be a lot of fun. I put that on the calendar a long time ago because like it felt like that was always going to be a big series, but now it feels even more so, just given that Georgia seems to have kind of smoothed out some of its rough edges, or at least is in the process of doing so, and Arkansas similarly with the lineup really taking off, which is a perfect segue into Arkansas and Vanderbilt. It felt a little like some of these other series we've talked about, where it's like for Vanderbilt not to get a game here is rough. There was an extra inning game in the middle game of the series, and then today it finished 7-3, but it was a lot closer than that. Vanderbilt had a 3-2 lead pretty late in that game, and Arkansas got a couple of big swings. But I think that's kind of my bigger point here, is that it's not just that the overall numbers for Arkansas offensively are better, though they are. It's also that like they're coming through in late game situations offensively, and not just with like, hey, we're going to string together 5 singles. Like they're hitting the ball hard and hit the ball out of the park late in games, in clutch moments when it matters most. And that's just a piece that's been missing for them, the last couple of years. So it had to be a sight for sore eyes, not just to get a sweep of Vanderbilt on the road, which is great as it is for Arkansas, but also to have done it the way they did it, where the offense, I mean, they had games they pitched really well, 9-0 in the opener of the series. Like, can't beat that. But they also took care of business offensively, and this wasn't a series of 4-2 games like it might have been last year had these two teams played.
Yeah, that's a good point. I felt like Vanderbilt pitched well enough. Arkansas just hit so many freaking bombs, man. I mean, it was just every time you turn around, and I saw more of today's game because Connor Fennell is so much fun to watch, dude. I mean, it's 88, 89, and it's arm side run, and it is hard to hit. And then he breaks off that 72 breaking ball, and the changeup is, it's probably in the middle of that. It's around, high 70s, and he's just a really fun watch, and he works so fast. And it was all the gamesmanship of, he's trying to work fast, and Arkansas's looking in the dugout so you don't make eye contact, so you're not, quote, engaged with the hitter. It was a fun game to watch, and I felt like that, with what Arkansas is doing right now, if they can go on the road and sweep a team like Vanderbilt, who's got players, this is a team that can do. They may be able to accumulate enough wins to take the conference. And I was kind of thinking this was going to be a Georgia-Tennessee thing, right? That they were going to be the two top. And I'm rethinking this. I think Arkansas's got a shot to get in there and accumulate enough wins to potentially win the conference. Now, how much of that does it matter, right? Because all of those teams are going to be hosting, probably going to be top 8. They're going to be in great position for the postseason. But it certainly as good of as much success as you can have throughout the regular season is only going to help you, right? You gain that much confidence as you move forward. So you can't be more impressed with what Arkansas has done. And if you're Vandy, you're kind of wondering, right? They're not hitting the ball out of the park. They're not able to win these slugfest, which in today's college baseball tends to be what we see a lot of. And can you offset it enough with great pitching, which they have? And that's going to be where's the mix? Where's the balance? And this weekend, it wasn't enough against a great Arkansas team. In ongoing weeks, they go to Florida next week. That's not going to be easy. Florida can hit the ball out of the park. And if their pitching shows up, then that's going to be a problem for Vandy too. So where are they? Can they go down to Florida, a Florida team that's got one conference win? Can they go down? There's an opportunity there to take a road series. Can they get it done? And to do that, they're going to have to hit the ball out of the park.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike. Our buddy Mike Rooney, who was on the call for today's game, he made a point on the broadcast. I don't know that I totally agree with, but I think it's a valid point. But he was like, so many of Vanderbilt's position players just aren't the best version of themselves right now. Brody Johnson's kind of dealing with a little bit of that freshman slump where there's film and he's swinging and missing more, and RJ Austin's not swinging it great right now. And so I don't think he's wrong. I just don't really agree. Like, I just don't know if there's yes, it could be a little better, but I don't know that it's going to be so transformatively better that it's going to change kind of who they are as a team. So I'm with. I think the next 2 weeks are going to be fascinating. They've got on the road at Florida for all the reasons you listed as interesting, and then they've got on the road at Oklahoma the following weekend, which is also interesting because that's a team that's kind of right. It's a little bit of feels like a coin flip. Two teams that are kind of in the similar type of range. Quite frankly, teams that are built to do similar things, right? Like Oklahoma's offense has been a pleasant surprise, but let's be honest, like their bread is buttered on the mound. Yeah. So, that should be fun too. So, one more thing on Arkansas before, and that's all I got on it, is that Gabe Gackle pitched a little better. Yeah. And so that's a sight for sore eyes, and I'll be interested to see what they do when Gage Wood comes back, because I do think they have options. I don't know that it's as simple as Gage Wood in, Landon Beidelshe's out. Mm-hmm. It could be Gage Wood in, Gabe Gackle to the bullpen, because that just our best combination, right? Or it could be Gage Wood into a smaller role and let's build him back up. They do have options, but it will be interesting to see what they do there. I also think the emergence of Aiden Jimenez in the bullpen, the Oregon State transfer, who like I didn't really have any expectation for, because I'll be honest, I didn't really know who he was coming into the season. You know, he's been great. So like he's
and
a guy
Ben
who's been
Bybee,
able.
too. I mean,
Ben Bybee was great today. Yeah,
where he just comes in and dominates.
Yeah, so they're shocker. Arkansas is in good shape on the mound, but yeah, the impressive stuff for the Razorbacks, and I'm with you that they're right there, you know, with Tennessee and Georgia in this conversation. Before we move on to our next series, Mark, real quick, I have to remind our listeners that in addition to Academy Sports and Outdoors, Highway to Hoover is also brought to you by Tecovas Boots. Whether it's the leather in your glove or your tailgating chairs, baseball people know that quality matters. That's why we love Tecovas Boots. Born in Texas, just like yours truly, handcrafted with over 200 meticulous steps and comfortable from day one, they're perfect for wherever the college baseball season takes you. From road trips to rivalry games, post-game celebrations, or just everyday wear, Tecovas Boots are made to go the distance. Find your perfect pair today at Tecovas. All right, Mark, let's talk LSU Mississippi State. Another series that this might have been the weirdest series of them all. It was Thursday, Saturday. They had two delayed games. The Friday and Saturday games were delayed a bunch, especially on Saturday. That game didn't start until 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. So a late one.
Local.
Yeah. So thoughts and prayers to all the beat writers who had to sit there all day trying to figure out when they were going to be able to play. But my big thing here is that, man, talk about the theme of this podcast really feels like missed opportunities for teams that lost series, because Mississippi State had one too. Like that Thursday night game, it felt like they had the game in their control, and then you could start to get greedy, right? Because if you win that Thursday game, in a game in which you started Evan Sierre, then you're looking at Pico Khan in Friday's game, and you're like, well, now we're cooking. Like, you know, we could get greedy here. Doesn't happen. LSU mounts a big comeback in Thursday's game, wins that game. Pico Khan was great, but he got outpitched on Friday, and that's going to happen. Like, that's not on him, obviously. And then you just get blown off the field Saturday night.
In the first inning.
8 runs in the first inning, yeah. So, like, it felt like the weekend got, for Mississippi State, the first, 5 innings of Thursday were just like this high of, like, starting to believe that they could win this series. And then I have to imagine, like, for the fan base, morale just got lower as the weekend went on.
Yeah.
Because it just was one kind of gut punch after another. But kudos to LSU as well. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do with the comeback and then winning a 2-1 game. And then, you know, obviously the third game was a little bit easier. But just, again, a missed opportunity for Mississippi State to salvage something. And now they are also among the teams at 1-8 in the league, just in a massive hole.
Are. And Pico Khan has turned into one of the best pitchers in the conference. And I don't know that, I mean, I knew he would be good, but I certainly didn't see this coming. And I feel like that, you know, Mississippi State has pitched for the most part pretty well. They just don't pitch in the games they hit, and they don't hit in the games they pitch. And that has hurt them when they played the best teams, you know, that they faced. And now they find themselves at 1-8. You know, we talked about the strength of schedule inside the SEC. There's just third. Florida's and South Carolina's is the only one tougher so far. They're tied with Missouri. I feel like, you know, again, that's going to even out. They're going to face some teams that aren't quite as good, but I mean, you face Texas and LSU and Oklahoma. Those are 3 really good teams. A lot of, especially Oklahoma on the road, a lot of clubs are going to struggle with that. But you hope to not go 1-8 in those 3 series, and that's kind of where Mississippi State is. If they were 3-6 right now, we'd probably be having a little bit different view on them, because they'd still be in it, even though you wouldn't be happy. But getting swept twice in 3 weeks, I mean, the pressure is mounting. So it sets up a really big series for the Bulldogs next week. They host a South Carolina team. Again, played a brutal schedule to open things up. They're 1-8. Somebody can help get well, all right, and the other one is going to feel like the season might be over because the hole's going to be so big. So that'll be a fascinating series next week. We always have these monster matchups between two top 10, top 15 kind of clubs, but that's going to be a fascinating one between teams that we're expecting to do more than what they are. Then on the flip side of this, LSU being able to get to win all 3 games, the bullpen has been the story for them. I mean, with Zach Cowan in game 1, Kason Evans in game 2, and then just a cast of characters to finish the game after they had a big lead. I feel like that's, we wondered about their pitching depth. We stressed how good that rotation was going to be. But I feel like if Cowan and Evans are going to give them that, and it wasn't just 2 inning stints. I think it was 4 innings for each. It was a long look of just dominance, and there's not many people out. They may be the only team out there that's got 2 of those guys that can just basically be your second starter and just come in and finish the game and just shut people out. That's the difference maker. And then the offense has been good. I mean, it continues to work pitch counts. It continues to drive I guess we'd say turn small innings into big innings. A lot of crooked numbers they're putting up, and I feel like this is a team that if they can continue at this pace, they can win it all. I think their ceiling is as high as anyone. It's just trying to find, what's going to be the magic formula to get them there.
My last thought on this series is with Mississippi State, because I thought you said it well on LSU. I'll leave you with this on Mississippi State. I'm not entirely sure what as a team more broadly, what they hang their hat on right now, right? Where it feels like, I think you kind of made a similar point where it's like they have days they pitch really well. They have days where they score enough runs. Rarely do the 2 meet, it feels like. Yeah. So I think that's part of that, right? Is that, they're not elite in any one area necessarily. And so you're just going to kind of maybe have that inconsistency. But that's where I struggle with Mississippi State is, you like a lot of individual pieces there, but I'm just not sure exactly if we know, like, hey, if this team's really humming, X or Y is what is driving the bus for them. Like, I just don't have a feel for that necessarily. So that's kind of my big takeaway there. Let's talk Kentucky and A&M, Mark.
Wow. Yeah.
This was indeed a wild one, as you so descriptively told us in our D1 internal messaging, that will not see the light of day. It was, but no, it was just wild. Like it really wasn't. And I got to give a lot of credit to Kentucky here, where these are types of games where last year's team, I would have been like, yeah, okay, they can win those games because they were despite what people still have misconceptions about, like they were a very good offense last year. They could win games like this. I did not know if this team this year would be able to win games like this. And you could say, oh, well, it's just A&M, but the pitching was the part that A&M's actually good at. So, so the fact that they did it against A&M
starters, they really did.
Yeah. So I actually, that makes me more impressed that it was A&M's pitching, right? Because there are better teams with lesser pitching than A&M. So the fact that Kentucky did it against that team, I think is really impressive. Man, Tyler Bell's really good. Like we wondered if the bat was going to be able to keep up, and so far so good. Like he had a 4-for-4 game in this series. He's the second leading hitter behind Cole Hage on that team. Kentucky has its own issues. Like they're kind of a little bit of an inverse situation with A&M, where from day to day on the mound, I think Ben Cleaver's been pretty consistent. He was pretty good again today. But outside of that, like it's kind of a game-to-game proposition for Kentucky on the mound. And it just feels like this might just kind of have to be how they win games. Like the game 2 win was 14-11. I forget what the final score was today, 9 to something. This just might have to be how they win games. And that might be okay. Like so far they're tracking to be a regional team, or at least very much in that conversation. So maybe that's okay. But man, is it just kind of a different deal where, they've been so tied to tight defense and, relatively keeping the opponent to a relatively low score, like that kind of stuff. And this year's just been a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, with A&M, they've been waiting on the bats to break out, and they did this weekend. I mean, they hit, 5 home runs on Saturday, and Caden Sorrell finally came back to the lineup, and all of those things. The offense was vastly improved, and they didn't pitch. I mean, at all. They didn't get much all from any of their 3 starters, and the bullpen was hit or miss, and just it's got to be so frustrating for that staff where you've been waiting to hit all year because your pitching's been carrying you, and then you finally just you're bursting at the seams, hitting balls all over the park, and then your pitching lets you down, and it's kind of what next, right? And I feel like they go to Tennessee next weekend, and they're 1-8 right now. They're staring at 1-11, and the season is kaput at that point. I mean, you got no shot if you're 1-11 to get to whatever you need. Whether it's 12, you need to go to go 12-18. You need to go 11-11. Or 10-11 the rest of the year. I mean, just no. Yeah. So anyway, you're on mute. So
it was a comedy of errors right there.
Yeah, we're really rolling right now. But anyway, they're in a bad spot, and I do feel like with what Kentucky for them is just, as Nick told me earlier this year, they're a do whatever it takes kind of offense, and they certainly do that. I mean, they need to stand in front of a pitch, or they need to fight off a guy and run his pitch count up, or they need to hit the ball out of the park. I mean, they seem to be able to find that, and as a result, they're having a lot of success. When those situations present themselves.
To clean up our faulty math earlier, if A&M falls to 1-11, they need to go 11-7 the rest of the way to finish 12-18.
Yeah, which maybe they can do, but the schedule doesn't ease up. I mean, they still got Arkansas and Texas and LSU, and it's brutal.
Well, and the other thing is that doesn't even really guarantee anything on a couple of fronts. One is 12 SEC wins enough? We don't know. We'll find out. But then also they've dropped some like non-conference games. So like, what is the RPI going to look like? Because if they're 12-18 and the RPI is 42, probably not. I'm not saying it will be. Probably be better than that, but you just don't know.
Depends on who you beat.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Oklahoma and Alabama, Mark. One of the more fascinating series this weekend felt like it was real, like a seesaw where it just like could have gone either way. Right down to today's game where Alabama goes out to an 8-1 lead, ends up 8-6. And that feels kind of like part and parcel for what Oklahoma's been this year, where honestly, like they've pitched pretty well, but it hasn't been necessarily the dominance on the mound that we thought was possible with this team. And yet they've kind of found ways to win because the offense has been better than I thought it would be. And they do seem to have this ability to, win ugly. They seem tough, like just a really tough team. And so they're always in these games. This felt just like a weekend where the coin flip went the other way for them. So I'm not overly discouraged about anything here from an Oklahoma side of things, but I think for Alabama, a weekend in which you didn't have Riley Quick in his normal spot. You were thrown off a little by that. You got a pretty decent start from Bobby Alcock, but we're in a situation where you had to kind of have him wear it a little bit in his start. And they find a way to win this series when they had some headwinds coming at him, did Alabama, is impressive stuff. Survived a little bit of a scare with a Justin LeBron injury. Seems okay. So thank goodness for that. Just not just for Alabama, but also for the sport of college baseball, because what a bummer it'd be to lose that guy for any extended period. But a big series win again, because this was another one of those, felt like a coin flip series, and Alabama comes out on top.
Yeah. On the Oklahoma side, that's a team I really got a lot of joy just watching them play. I mean, they're so aggressive on the bases. They fight off so many foul, 2-strike pitches. I think the stat was in 4 innings they fouled off 30 Zane Adams pitches. I mean, it was just phenomenal what they're able to do. Maybe not the most talented team in the conference, but they certainly fight you. And I feel like they're a team they're going to be in every game, and they're going to be a factor and make the postseason and be a thorn in the side of wherever they go, or heck, they could also host if things break right. From an Alabama standpoint, being able to win the series where Riley Quick doesn't throw, he's facing a blood blister. They think he's going to be back for next Saturday at Auburn. And be able to do that offensively. I mean, you mentioned LeBron's injury. They had a really bad collision in the outfield today. Richie Bonamalo and Cade Snell ran together and caused an inside the park home run. But more importantly, for Alabama's standpoint, they both had to leave the game. Snell ended up having stitches. Bonamalo came back. He was in for concussion protocol, which is kind of one of those weird rules where you leave the game in baseball and you get to come back because he's getting checked out. But that was big for them to be able to do that. The other thing, Bryce Fowler, who was their leadoff man for most of the year, really was in an awful slump in the last few days. They moved him down to the 9-hole, and he's just hitting the ball all over the park. His kind of return to form, or what they expected him to be. So that's big for Alabama. I mean, they're sitting here 6-3 in conference play after 3 weekends. I think with the competition they face, you take that. Heading into the year, you got Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. You figure that's 6-3. Sign me up for that. And now they go to Auburn, and which will be a really fun series on the Plains. I feel like with Alabama, if Quick comes back, good as new, and you have Zane Adams and Aiden Vinatieri pitched well in a Sunday role today. Maybe he can give you something, with Alcock. I think that's that's a team that I may view a little bit more favorably than I did maybe a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Interestingly, on that collision, another thank goodness, for Alabama's sake, that nothing truly horrible came of it, because Bonamolo is probably the most dynamic player not named Justin LeBron on that roster.
Yeah.
And Cade Snell kind of quietly has turned himself into just an excellent hitter. I mean, I guess it was always in there, but last year he dealt with the injury and he got going, but it just wasn't quite the same. What impressed me most about him is in 3 weekends of SEC play, he struck out once, just once.
He's like third in the conference in batting. I mean, it's just And it's, I'll be interested. I think he's probably made himself a little bit of money. He's not like a blue chip prospect or anything, but like he's just going to hit enough to where some team is going to be like, all right, we're not really sure where we're going to play him. Mm-hmm. And he's not, like an Adonis physically. Like he's not out there like, oh my goodness, this is just, 6'4" and 220 and can run. He's not that, but the dude can really hit. Yeah.
And,
hitter.
Yes, scouts will tell you like one of the hardest things to find and evaluate is this guy going to be able to hit big league pitching, not hit the ball out of the park, because like comparatively that's kind of a dime a dozen, but it's, do you have the feel to hit to be a big leaguer? And so somebody who's gonna never strike out in SEC play and he's hitting 438 in SEC play, like that's going to catch some attention. Like he's really having a nice year. And I don't know that it's I mean, I guess we're part of this as media members. Like, I don't know that it's drawn enough attention for how good he's been this year.
I mean, he's been one of my favorites to watch, Joe. I mean, just a guy who just kind of gets it, right? It's, the captain of the team, the guy that they look to, and they moved him up. He was hitting 7th for bulk of the year, and they kind of went through some struggles, so they shuffled the lineup, and now he's batting 3rd behind LeBron, so that should make them both better, right? And I feel like he's one of these guys who was a good player last year, who's really elevated and become something more than anyone really expected.
The series that I was at was Tennessee, South Carolina. I asked on Weekend Waypoints, the Friday edition of the show, does South Carolina, do they have anything for Tennessee? The answer was mostly no. I mean, it brings me no pleasure to say that. They were in game 2, had a late lead in that game. But I got to tell you, from where I was at, even with that game being as tight as it was, the series never felt in jeopardy really at any moment. And I think the hardest part for South Carolina is, I feel like they played pretty well. They it wasn't like they kicked the ball around. It wasn't like they walked a million guys. They had some clutch hits. They got some great performances. There was a game in which, Bo Holland's a freshman, went 4 for 4. Petrie got some hits, and they got Jordan Carrion had a bunch of hits, and KJ Scobie hit the ball hard at some various times. Jarvis Evans pitched well on Tennessee has seen enough Jarvis Evans, by the way, for their, I remember being at a game at Georgia 2 years ago when Jarvis Evans came out of the bullpen when Charlie Goldstein came up lame going to cover first base, and all Jarvis Evans did was basically shut down Tennessee for 5 1/3 innings. Yeah. And I honestly had no idea who he was when he came out of the bullpen. I was like, I don't know who this person is. And he's, speaking of Connor Fennell being fun, he's kind of fun too. Yeah, it's I
agree.
86, 87 from the left side with some, it's got some run on it, but it's a lot of changeup. It's a lot of slider. He's got a pitch, and he gave up a Reese Chapman 3-run homer relatively early in that game, but just kind of pitched through it and ended up, that was all he gave up in 6 innings. And so I say all that to say, South Carolina played pretty well. I wasn't there for Sunday's game, so I didn't see that with my own eyes, but first 2 days didn't play poorly. They actually hit okay, which was the concern coming into the year. They're just not good enough certainly against a team like Tennessee. And that's, I guess on some level, at least you're playing well. That's better than the alternative. They're playing hard. They're playing fundamental baseball. But the hard part about that is just there doesn't feel like any levers to pull, to fix anything. It just kind of is what it is, and they'll win some games. But against the elite teams in this conference, they just don't have they're just outmanned, I guess, is the best way to put it.
And, a big part of this is who they had to play. I mean, there are a lot of teams that are going to get swept. If you go to Fayetteville and then you host the Vols, the reigning national champions, #1 team in the country, there are a lot of teams in our poll right now who would get swept by those 2 teams. So part of this is who you played, but the other part of this is you just have to find a way. This is the league you're in. You have similar resources. You've got to be able to not get swept, to find a way to steal a game. And similar to what we talked about with Mississippi State, South Carolina is in the same spot, or Florida is in the same spot. So I think for South Carolina, it's is the offense good enough to carry them? Because they have had, Dylan Eskew's out, one of their weekend starters. They've had to kind of piece things together. What does that look like? Behind the plate, they've had injuries with Talmadge LeCroy's out. Are you good enough to withstand not being at your best when you're playing these monsters? And right now, they're just not. And who would be, right? There's not a lot of teams who, when you aren't at full speed, can you compete at that level? But that's the task, whether you like it or not. And that's kind of where we are right now. So they go to Starkville, as we mentioned earlier, just a huge series for both of those teams this weekend. One I'll have my eyes on, certainly, as as they try to get back in it. Because if either of these teams have success next weekend, you get some momentum, you get to feeling better about yourself, and things could change. Just not having to play one of these juggernauts will be enormous for South Carolina.
I wrote about, after Saturday night's game, I wrote about what does championship DNA mean? It's kind of a nebulous term that we use, and I think it can mean a lot of things, but I saw a lot of it over the weekend with Tennessee. I mean, one, it's winning that Saturday game where South Carolina fought hard and took the lead and was competitive, and you're dealing with the pitcher. Let's face it, like you and I called Jarvis Evans fun, but part of the reason why it's fun is it's just like compared to the rest of what you see in the SEC on the mound, it's just not, it's kind of funky, and like it's frustrating for the opposing hitters sometimes. And so it was dealing with that to come back to win that game. But also I think there were a lot of micro examples. Andrew Fisher, a kind of a positionless guy, and that's, I guess, putting it kindly, ends up at first base and made a couple of really nice defensive plays in that game. And he's not going to be prime, pick your good defensive first baseman for current times, Christian Walker, Trey Morgan, for most recent example, for my childhood example, Doug Minkiewicz. Like, he's never going to be that, but like he made some nice plays there and really picked up his team when they needed it. It's also in the fact that, and Gavin Keelan's out with an injury now, but, before the season, Dean Curley played shortstop at Tennessee, played shortstop for Team USA over the summer, and then they brought in Gavin Keelan, who'd played shortstop at Louisville for 2 straight years. And, Tony, after the game, talked about having to sit down with those guys and saying like, hey, I got to be honest, I don't know where we're going to play you. And they were just they were okay with it. They were like, okay, just trusting that, if we're good enough, we're going to get on the field somewhere. And that's how it's played out. And so that's one of a million things that's allowed Tennessee to be the best team in the sport to this point again. And that, to me, that's all those things kind of make up championship DNA, and you just kind of know it when you see it. And it's easy to say because they're number one in the country and they look great and they're talented and all that stuff. But it just seemed fitting that that's kind of how that played out. Yeah.
I guess my thought on Tennessee, I mean, Liam Doyle, he had a bunch of strikeouts, but he wasn't as dominant, certainly, as he had been. Marcus Phillips was really good. I mean, he might be their best pitcher right now. He's certainly pitching well. And then on Sunday's game, where they stick the 2 freshmen in, Coons and Krenzel, I mean, they've just found it, man. It's 4 or 5 innings between the two each. And they're just shoving, and this is a couple weeks in a row they've been able to do this. So they've got it. I mean, on the pitching side, it's figured out. And at some point, A.J. Russell's coming back, we assume, and he just adds another bullet into that arsenal there. So I feel like Tennessee, you got to be feeling really good about things based on 3 weeks into the conference.
Final series, talk about Texas, Mizzou, another one that they played Friday, then played a doubleheader Saturday to finish that series up. Texas avoided getting got in Columbia, which is, a thing that we're, Mizzou's still out there on the prowl looking for the team they're going to get.
Didn't last long.
No, Texas run rules them in game 1, and then both ends of the doubleheader, I would say, were comfortable wins for Texas. If they weren't, not necessarily blowouts, but comfortable wins. To me, the biggest individual story out of this was the start of Ruger Riojas for Texas, where it's, he's kind of been their Swiss Army knife bullpen guy, like in the mold of Evan Oschenbeck from A&M. And they put him in the rotation, and it's like a revelation, and you could say, oh, it's just Missouri, but like Missouri's actually swinging the bat pretty well. So this is actually a situation where it's like, actually that, sure, they're not Arkansas or Tennessee or whoever in terms of
Georgia
offensive,
next week.
Right, or Georgia. Yeah, they're not in that conversation of offensive prowess, but this is not last year's Missouri team offensively. So I think there was something to that. So I'll be interested to see how they manage that moving forward. Because with them already kind of being locked in with Spencer and Luke Harrison, if Riojas is that third guy, like now we're really, and if it's that Riojas, like now we're really cooking from a rotation standpoint for Texas.
Yeah, that was my call out from this series. Spencer has been good all year. And then Harrison, if anything, he's getting better. And then you add in Riojas on Sunday, and wow, you're getting innings, you're getting performance, production, pitchability stuff. It's you're checking a lot of boxes here. What you don't have is a lot of depth, but as long as you're getting a lot of innings out of those guys, then it mitigates that quite a bit. So I feel like Texas is in great shape, and now they're going to get a chance to try to cool off the hottest offense in the country in Georgia, and that's just a fascinating series next weekend in Austin. On the Missouri side, they're 0-9. I don't know how many SEC wins they're going to get this year. I think I've got them at 3 or 4 right now. They hopefully, for their sake, they'll get more than that, but it's going to take some upsets to do it, and things are going to have to fall into place. Their home series are tough. It's not like you're going to get somebody that you can get, because you don't, everybody views you as, hey, we're going to sweep this team, and we've got to do well against Mizzou, because everyone else we face is better than us, or at least equal. And I think that's a challenging spot for Mizzou to be in. But on the positive side, and you mentioned this, they've been able to hit the ball enough to keep themselves competitive and be in games. If they get a couple of games where the pitching comes together, and they've had some moments where that's happened, they just need it to happen the same day. And if they do that, they're going to ruin somebody's weekend. It's just a question of, when or if that occurs, because right now you've got 15 teams in the SEC that one level, and then Mizzou is just a level below that, and that's an awful place to be. It's just, there are a lot of teams in the country who will have much better records than Missouri, who might be a worse team because of who they face, because Mizzou is just going to get there. Look at that gauntlet. You don't believe me? Go look at the schedule, okay, and do the math and see how your team would do against that team. And maybe you pull a few more upsets than they do, but maybe you don't. And I feel like that's just a really challenging spot, that how this league has evolved and ascended into this place it's in right now just makes it so tough for a club like Missouri, who, let's face it, they've got a lot of limitations and disadvantages compared to the teams they're trying to compete against.
Yeah, that's well said. It's got to be frustrating. It's cold comfort for Mizzou that hey, you're swinging the bat, it's better, and that was kind of your issue last year when, if they, who knows what their record would be if they were pitching now as well as they were last year, and were hitting as well as they are now. Like, if you'd put those two things together, like, I don't think they'd be winless, because they pitched pretty well last year. So it is frustrating for Mizzou that, they brought back some guys. They're actually healthier on the mound this year than they were last year. They lost Pimentel, which is huge, obviously, but they got some guys back, and they returned some guys, and they had some pretty highly regarded recruits come in, and they just haven't pitched it as well as they would like. And so it's frustrating that they're getting the thing they're better at the thing they were so bad at last year, and the thing that they were good at last year has betrayed them. And so that's just got to be frustrating that they feel like they can't catch a break. Quickly, one more thing on Texas, couple of injury things there. Rylan Galvan will be back, is expected back for Georgia. Max Ballou expected back for Georgia. Those were kind of like minor injury things there. A wrist for Ballou. I just had to look this up. A wrist for Ballou. Adrian Rodriguez also dealing with a thumb injury. That's a little more up in the air. They got good stuff from Will Gasparino this weekend, so that probably mitigates some of it. I think it was a 4 home run weekend for Gasparino, 5 home run week for Gasparino. So obviously that helps mitigate some of the what might be lost from guys who are out with injury. Mark, anything else before we say goodbye to the listeners here?
Well, I think as we head into this 3 weeks out, I feel like there are four, or we'll just say, I feel like there are 5 SEC teams, Georgia, Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, LSU, who are, I guess, elevating. And the question is, 1, will they come back to the pack? 2, will somebody who's kind of in that middle tier elevate? And that middle tier would be Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma, Vandy, Auburn, Kentucky, in that 4 to 5 to 6 win range. And then what happens at the bottom? Because you've got 4 or 5 teams at the bottom here that don't like where they are and could certainly make a run and get back in this one good weekend, and all of a sudden you're changing your outlook on them as well. But we are starting to kind of understand where teams are, and in this unbalanced schedule, that's really interesting to me, because a lot of it's based on who you played, and kind of as I've been going through the strength of schedule exercise, so much of it is schedule dependent. I mean, your South Carolinas and your Mississippi States and Missouris, and those teams have played the hardest schedules, okay? And they're at the bottom of the standings. So as all of this continues to change over the course of you get to play more opponents, it's going to be fascinating to see, can they get back in this? Can these teams at the bottom, and can these teams at the top who maybe haven't played as challenging as schedules, what happens when they start playing each other? And somebody's got to lose these games. So I think that's going to be, this is new, this 16-team league. We added 2 heavyweights in Texas and Oklahoma. What do we get out of this? Because everybody else is getting better too. I mean, we're in the portal NIL era where everybody's loading up their roster and taking the best players from other programs, and it's all shooting upward. We see it in basketball, all the number 1 seeds make the Final Four. I think this is kind of where we are right now. So seeing how all of this evolves in this first year of the 16-team SEC, to me, is we're starting to get a view on it, but as week after week continues, it's going to be one of the more fun things to follow as the season progresses.
Yeah, totally agree. There'll be more discussion on that, I'm sure, this week. As I said earlier in the show, first Nerdcast this week for Kendall, Aaron, and Mark. Mostly Mark and Aaron. Kendall chipping in occasionally when they shake it. Yeah. When they shake him a little bit to be like, hey, we need your opinion here. We kid because we love.
He's the tiebreaker.
That's right.
I rarely agree. So
yeah, that's right. That's what makes it fun. So there will be plenty of discussion about that topic specifically, both this week on that show and the rest of the way on that show, because it will be fascinating. We don't have any definitive answers because we've never been here before. So, and the basketball example probably only gets us so far in terms of understanding how they're going to do it. So should be a lot of fun to watch unfold. Mark, you are correct about that. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. I want to thank our sponsors for this show and every episode of Highway to Hoover, Academy Sports and Outdoors, and Tecovas Boots. I want to thank Mark, as always, for joining me, and thank you, the listener, for listening.